beautiful, welcome to my channel. In today's video we are going to be talking about the new Fenty Beauty Eyeshadow Palette. This palette is called Posse, I believe, and it has a total of 12 shades. I cannot wait to show you guys the palette, the swatches, and I'm going to be coming up with 3 looks in this video to give you some ideas of what to do with the palette if you do decide to get it yourself. If you guys are excited for the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up before you leave. Also, if you're new to my channel, please don't leave without subscribing, and let's go ahead and get into the palette. Let me start by saying that I've never loved an eyeshadow palette from Fenty before. Every time I've tried her eyeshadows, I've been a little bit underwhelmed by either the performance or the color story, or I just wish for a little bit more. So when I saw this palette, first impressions, I kind of felt the same way. This is what the shades look like up close. It has a total of 12 shades. It has 6 mattes and 6 shimmers. It's kind of divided into 2, I would say, like the 6 shades to the left can be a palette, the 6 shades to the right can be a palette, and then I discovered that it kind of clicks open and you can take the shadow insert out of the palette, which I found to be a little bit weird. So I was looking at the palette box to see if there was anything said about that, and I also looked at Sephora.com to see if in the description of the palette there was anything to be said about why the palette clicks out in the way that it does, and unfortunately I couldn't find anything. So if you guys know why the palette does this, I'm wondering if they're going to sell refills or if they're going to sell different inserts that you can put in your Fenty palette in the future. I don't know, it's very intriguing the way that they made it, and so if you know why the palette clicks out in the way that it does, please let me know down in the comment section, because I couldn't find any information about that. Let me go ahead and show you the swatches next. Okay, here are all 12 shades swatched. I didn't have enough space in my arm, so there's 2 shades on my palm as well. And I would say I went over each shade maybe a couple of times to get them to show up as vibrant as they look right now, but they didn't swatch terribly. And honestly, there is no patchiness, everything's super soft, everything seems very blendable. And I really like the little micro glitters in the shimmer shades. I definitely do wish that the shades weren't as similar as they are to one another. This pink shimmer and that pink shimmer look really similar. There's 2 really light matte shades I feel like we could have done with just one, and then this shade, and this shade, while having slight differences, are extremely close to each other as well. I was not disappointed at all by the way that the palette swatched. I think the swatches look really beautiful, but for a palette with 12 shades, I do wish for a little bit more variety in the shades. I honestly don't know why we need 2 like creamy light matte shades that are virtually going to do the same thing. These 2 pinks, I'm wearing both of them on my eye. I'll show you the tutorial in a second. They look very similar to one another as well. And then I feel similarly about this shimmer, that shimmer, and this shimmer. They have slightly different undertones, slightly different shimmer, glittery stuff added to them, but I feel like once you put it on the eye, you're barely going to be able to tell the difference between the 2. So that's kind of a little bit of a drawback to me. I wish that there was a little bit more variety, especially because the palette, it's not even a huge palette. Like if you give me 30 something shade eyeshadow palette and a couple of the shades look similar, I get it, you know? It's fine, it's valid. But with the amount of similar shades that this palette has, it makes it go from 12 shades to like a 7 shade eyeshadow palette, you know? I'm definitely dying to show you guys how the shadows perform, so let's go ahead and get into the tutorials, and I will be back to give you my final thoughts. As you can see, I already did this eye because I wanted to kind of get a feel on the shadow formula from Fenty. I wanted to see if they had changed anything, because I have tried other palettes from Fenty in the past, and I've honestly never been impressed with the shadow formula. So I'll tell you what I think about this one in a second, but let's go ahead and recreate this look on this eye. First things first, I'm going to grab this color here with a big fluffy brush. This one's my Refer number 15, and I'm just going to use it kind of to set the crease area. A little bit more of that same shade, and I just want to make sure I have a nice wash of color on the crease. It's a very light shade, it's kind of the same color as my skin, so I didn't really get much from that one. So I went to this shade next to use as a transition color, and with the same fluffy brush, that is exactly what I'm going to do. Just put it over, blend it into the first shade, and as you can see, the mattes perform nicely. I'm just doing little circles in windshield wiper motions. A little bit more. They're not extremely pigmented, but when shades aren't extremely pigmented, it's better for beginners in my opinion, just because you can go back and build things up and blend as you go, rather than it becoming too much too fast and you giving up on blending. So that is that nice wash of color all over the crease. Then I'm switching to my Refer #1 brush. I'm going to use this brown shade right here, and I'm going to put it on the outer corner of the eye. Start blending it into the crease color ever so slightly. A little bit more right here on the inner part. Again, little circles on the edges so that it blends upwards. Going back to the outer corner. Like I said before, you do have to go back a couple of times just to kind of get the desired intensity sometimes. So then with my Refer #2 brush, I'm going to grab this light pinky shade right here, and I'm going to put it on the center of the eyelid by patting it in place up to the crease area but not over, and I'm going back for a little bit more and building it. Same brush, I'm going to this shade right here, which looks very similar. I was very surprised at how close these two shades are, but this one is a bit darker, and so with the darker one, I'm going to go through the edges here on both sides of the center shade. Back with my #1 brush in that brown shade, I'm just going to make sure that it's looking nice and that the colors are blending together, just tapping over the shimmer a little bit so that they blend nicely. And then with my same #1 brush, I'm going to grab a little bit of the darkest shade in the palette, and I'm going to put it on the outer corner of the eye, tap it in place, mix it with the crease color by doing little circles around the area. Tip of the #1 brush in that same dark color, and I'm going underneath my eye, back and forth with that dark shade. And I really love that dark matte shade. I think it made the difference with this eye look. It just made everything a little bit more interesting and contrasting. Same #1 brush, and I'm going to grab a little bit of this shade to diffuse the under eye area even more. Lastly, back to my Refer #2 and the lightest color here. And that's going to be my inner corner highlighter. So I'm tapping it on the inner corner and then just blending it in ever so slightly. I just applied my rich brown eyeliner from Patrick Tattoo My Waterline, and I'm about to put on my Rare Beauty mascara. Let me do that and I'll be right back to show you the final look. Alrighty, I am back. I went ahead and straightened my hair as well, and this right here is the final look with the Fenty palette. Overall, I do really like the way that it came out, but for some reason I'm just never too impressed with the Fenty shadows. I always wish they were a little bit more pigmented, a little bit more glittery, a little bit more exciting in some way. I don't know. There's just nothing super extraordinary about this one. There's much more affordable palettes that perform exactly the same as this one and that I like much better, if that makes sense. Let's go ahead and do a second look with this palette. I'm going to start with this shade up here, and that's going to be the crease shade on my eye. So I'm back and forth blending it. I'm using a fluffy Refer brush. I think this one is #27, and I'm just back and forth swiping that shade. A little bit more of that color and back and forth, just blend it. I'm going to darken it up with this shade right here. Same fluffy brush, just darkening up that outer corner a bit. Then I'm going to use this dark shade up here, and I'm going only on the outer V of the eye with this one, and doing little circles to blend it upwards ever so slightly with the tip of my Refer #1 brush. A little bit of that same dark matte shade underneath my eye with the tip of my Refer #1 brush on the outer half of the under eye. And with whatever's left on my brush, I'm bringing the dark shade in on the crease a little bit. I'm grabbing a little bit more of this shade right here and smoking out the shade underneath my eye. With my Refer #2, I'm going to grab the shiny dark shade, and I'm going to use it on the center of my eyelid and forward, and I'm patting and swiping the color across just like this. And then with the other side of the brush in this shade right here, we are going to do the inner third of my eyelid, just like this. I'm wiping off the fallout that I got underneath my eye. It wasn't much, but it is a little hard to take off. And I'm going to use this shade right here, right on the inner corner of the eye. I didn't see any other shade that I could use as an inner corner highlighter, so this one is it. Okay, so this right here is the second look before mascara. Let me go ahead and put on some mascara and I'll be right back to show you the final look number 2. Okay, back with mascara on, and this is the final second look with this Fenty palette. For this one, my intention was to get a look as dark as we could go with this palette to see what that would look like, and I like the result. Honestly, I'm not mad at it. I do enjoy these darker eyeshadow looks very much. Let's move on to look number 3. Let's go ahead and do a third look with the palette. I'm going to start with this shade down here, and I'm using my reference number 16 brush to put it on the crease of the eye. Just blending it back and forth. A little bit more right here on this outer corner of the eye to darken things up. And since I already used the darker matte shade for the first 2 looks, I'm not going to use it this time. I'm going to use this shade right here, and I'm going to do that pinky mauve shade on this inner part of the crease right here a little more. Still using my number 16 brush. So now we have cool tone transitioning into warm tone back here. And I want to go into this shade right here with my reference number 2 brush. By the way, I've been noticing that the shimmer shades have been getting hard panned a little bit. Like right here in the center of this one, you can see it. Also in the center of that one, you can see it a little bit. You can definitely see it on the pink shades right here. And I've only used the palette to swatch it and for 2 looks so far. Anyways, grabbing this shade and putting it right over in the center of the eye here. It's not doing much for me, is it? I'm going to grab this one here, which looks very, very similar, and put it right here just to see if it changes anything. No, they look the same. Okay, so I'm going to grab the light pinky shade right here once again and use it on the inner corner of the eye. I just cleaned this brush and it's a little wet, so it might look a little bit more vibrant. That wasn't applying right because it was not blending, but that's totally my fault because I was using a brush that was wet. So I'm going to go over it with another brush and halfway through the crease right here. Okay, so mixing both of these mattes right here, I'm just going to finish it up by smoking out the under eye area, and I'm using the tip of my reference number 1 brush for this. I'm going to do a brown eyeliner on the waterline, and this right here is the third look before mascara. Let me go ahead and put on some mascara and I'll show you the final result. I'm back with mascara on, and I wanted to show you the fallout underneath my eye. You can see it right there on the top of my cheekbone. Just so that you're aware, the palette does have quite a bit of kickback, so if you do end up for some reason getting it, I would do my eye makeup before I did my foundation, because when I try to wipe it off, it just does not go away. And I do have powder underneath my eyes already, but it just stays on the top of my cheek right there. Anyways, I'm back, and this right here is the final third look. I went ahead and applied mascara. Everything I have on my face will of course be linked down below. The brushes are linked down below, so if you have any questions about anything I'm using or you're interested in getting any of the products, definitely check out the description box. And yeah, let's go ahead and move on to my final thoughts. Before I get into my final thoughts, let me tell you a couple of things that I've learned about the palette. And the reason it's designed like this in the back is because you can click other palettes from Fenty to the back of this one and they can attach together to easily travel. So her 6-pan eyeshadow palettes, if you have any of those, you can click it on the back of this one and they can become one. Or the new highlighter palette that she just came out with along with this one, you can click them back to back and you can have 2 in 1. The highlighter palette, by the way, I want to quickly touch on. I went ahead and swatched it when I saw it in person and I was not impressed by it. I saw myself using, if any, only one of the shades out of the 3 that it comes with. The other 2 were much too dark for me. So I feel like the highlighter palette, if you have a tan to deep complexion, you can actually get a lot of use out of. But for me, 2 of the shades were just a little bit too dark, so I went ahead and skipped it. It does have that glitter bomb formula from Fenty that sparkles so beautifully, but I just knew that I wasn't going to get use out of it, so I skipped it. Now, while I now know that you can click palettes to the back of this one, I'm still not sure why is it that this one clicks out like this. So I'm still very curious about that, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. Now let's get into my final thoughts, and let me begin by saying I had very low expectations for this palette, so it was actually better than I expected. It performed well, it swatched well. The shades you do have to build up, but you eventually get to the color that you want. I am, like I said, disappointed at the color story because I feel like for a 12 pan eyeshadow palette, there's so many repeated shades. Like, a lot of the shades look the same. You can probably get the exact same looks I did today with probably like a 7 to 8 pan eyeshadow palette. So I feel like there is a lot of room for improvement. The shades are quite loose, so you will get fallout if you end up getting it. Definitely do your eyes before you do your foundation, because it is quite hard to get the fallout off of your face. With all of that said, I want to tell you if I think that the palette is worth it and whether or not I recommend it, and the answer to those questions is no. It is a $48 eyeshadow palette, and this has lower quality than ColourPop, in my opinion. Packaging is a little bit better than ColourPop's packaging because it is like plastic instead of cardboard. But as far as the shadow quality, I would say it's around the same shadow quality as ColourPop, if not even lower, and the color story is just not that great. So unfortunately, I don't think this one is worth the price. If somehow you could get this palette for like 50% off at like a $24, $25 price point, maybe it would be worth it. But please do not pay full price for this Fenty palette. I truly do not think it's worth it. You can get a lot more with your money from cheaper brands. Even that $16 e.l.f. palette I talked to you guys last month, I like more than this one, and again, that one is $16. I feel like the mattes on the e.l.f. palette are actually similar quality to the mattes in this Fenty palette, and the shimmers are a lot better than the shimmers in here. That's the other point I wanted to touch on. The shimmers are definitely not too impressive, and just by swatching and playing with them a couple of times while filming this video, I am getting a little bit of hard pan on some of the shades. So can I work with it? Yes. Can it create beautiful looks? Yes. But you can do the same with lower priced eyeshadow palettes. So I like it, but I don't recommend it. It's not terrible, I don't hate it, but it's just not something that I'm super excited about, and especially for that price point. That is all I have for you guys today. If you guys liked the video, please don't leave without giving it a thumbs up. Also, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I love you guys so much. Thank you for being here, and I hope to see you back in the next video. Bye!